Anaheim's White House was once a sprawling craftsman mansion. Now it's home to one of California's most spectacular menus and an eerie cast of spirits who still reside there. Elegant Arthur's restaurant in Nashville's 100-year-old Union Station has won every culinary award there is. The trains have stopped running, but the ghosts arrive nightly at this haunted restaurant. Most of us go to an elegant restaurant for the sumptuous entrees or the lavish ambiance. But Anne and Rob Waldowski are the authors of 12 books on haunted restaurants. And when they go out to a 4-star restaurant, they're looking for more than a delectable dinner. They want a side of goosebumps and a hair-raising tale to accompany their meal.
Basically, you know, in our 12 books that we've written to date, we've come across, about 1,000 places, and that's only the tip of the paranormal iceberg. If you look at what's probably out there, there's maybe upwards of 2,000 to 3,000 places that serve haunt cuisine.
The Queen Mary is one of the most luxurious ocean liners ever built. Long retired from active service, she's now berthed in Long Beach, California as a floating hotel, home to 3 restaurants and one of the world's most sumptuous and opulent Sunday brunches, where you can dine with friends and family and maybe even encounter a cast of uninvited ghosts.
The Queen Mary is said to be home to a number of spirits and poltergeists and ghosts.
The Queen Mary is considered the most haunted ship afloat. There are paranormal events, ghostly activity, poltergeist activity reported on a regular basis.
I believe that the Queen Mary is the most haunted vessel in the world because I was privileged to conduct research here for a period of about 3 years. During that time, in my opinion, I encountered at least 600 ghosts.
Before exploring the incredible ghost stories aboard the Queen Mary, we need to peek back at her origins. Because like most haunted locations, the ghosts are believed to be the spirits of those who inhabited the place from previous generations.
Well, during the ship's construction, which began in 1930, one man was reportedly killed or buried inside the ship. And given the monumental task of building the ship, there's no doubt that more people were probably killed.
The Queen Mary was launched in 1934 to great fanfare. Queen Mary herself was in attendance. 2 years later, when construction was complete, she began her maiden voyage across the Atlantic on May 27th, 1936. The Queen Mary was noted for her luxurious Art Deco design and for her food. The ship boasted the world's largest a la carte restaurant, and the menu was spectacular. Her passenger list always read like a who's who of the era. Movie stars like David Niven and Spencer Tracy graced her decks. The ship's pantry was filled with 20,000 pounds of poultry, 50,000 pounds of fresh meat, 17,000 pounds of fresh fish, and 20,500 bottles of beer, wine, and spirits.
Many spirits have been reported throughout the ship. I don't think there's a shaft way, an alleyway, a boiler room that doesn't have its stories.
David Main worked aboard the ship for 3 years and made 50 crossings aboard the Queen Mary.
When you hear of all the stories that happen on this ship, you can't rule out anything. A strange thing happened to me one night, quite late. I was sat on this bench with some friends, and suddenly heard some footsteps. I was sat on the bench at one end and a friend of mine at the other end. I stood up and looked round. There was no sign of any person walking by. The footsteps had been quite clear and very heavy. I then noticed that my friend at the other end was also standing up. I asked him what he was standing up for, and he said he'd heard footsteps and somebody walking by. There was no sign of anybody in the vicinity.
There's one particular story about the Queen Mary that may account for a lot of the spirited activity aboard the ship. In 1939, the ship was commissioned during World War II. It stood at a massive 1,019 feet, about 200 feet shorter than the Empire State Building. It was repainted, camouflaged, and called the Gray Ghost.
The Queen Mary was the largest and fastest troop ship ever to sail. Her once luxurious cabins were now filled with as many as 16,000 men per crossing. The elegant first-class dining room was transformed into a 24-hour mess hall, serving the ironic chipped beef SOS. The Queen Mary was also outfitted as a floating hospital, ferrying the wounded back from the war. There's no record kept from the war period of how many soldiers died aboard the ship, but one would have to guess the number could be sizable.
It was October 2nd, 1941, when the Queen Mary had its most tragic event take place. It's an event that left an indelible imprint on the ship, one that's led to its haunted history.
To a good dinner?
Coming up next, the unique mix of food and spirits aboard the Queen Mary leaves a lasting impression on all who dare visit her. And later, we'll travel to St. Louis to see what tragedy befell the original kings of beer. Coming up on Haunted Restaurants. In the dark of the night, in the U-boat-infested waters off Scotland, the Queen Mary's escort ship, the British cruiser HMS Curacoa, lost track of its proximity to the speeding liner. In a split second, the ship literally sliced through the Curacoa, cutting her in half. The Gray Ghost was under a strict no-stop order and was forced to sail on. The Curacoa sank quickly. Of the 439 aboard, only 101 men survived. After the war, the Queen Mary was refitted with all her appointments, and for the next 2 decades she would reign as Queen of the Sea, the most majestic of all luxury liners. But in 1967, with jet travel becoming faster and more economical, the Queen Mary was officially retired and sold to the city of Long Beach, where in 1971 she rose again, this time as the anchored jewel of the Pacific Rim.
On a ship, we have 3 restaurants. One of them is Sir Winston's, which are a fine dining restaurant. We have Chelsea, the seafood restaurant. And we have a Promenade Cafe. It's an upgraded American restaurant. This was a first-class eating area. On Sunday brunch, an average from 700 to 900 people.
We have a roast beef, turkey,
corn tortillas, flour tortillas,
fettuccine, pasta, royal bell pepper linguine, cheese ravioli.
The food is spectacular. The accommodations are top drawer, and almost everyone who works on the ship has a chilling tale to tell.
There are presence in the ship, and there are, if you want to call them souls or spirits, yes, they are still here because this is their home, and they feel this is where they probably belong at, definitely.
From the moment she arrived in Long Beach in 1967, the Queen Mary has drawn a crowd. Today, Sir Winston's, her elegant 4-star restaurant overlooking Long Beach Harbor, is known as one of California's finest and most distinct rooms to dine.
Chef has prepared a very special menu for you this evening. We start with the lobster claws appetizer.
Sir Winston's also features some added attractions that aren't on the menu: ghosts, apparitions, and spirits. Despite the otherworldly dinner guests, chefs Tom Tassoni and Bernard Hebert create dishes unparalleled in Southern California.
There's just been too many people that have reported similar incidents to be coincidental. They had no way of knowing ahead of time, you know, about the lady in white or the poor fellow that got trapped in the door downstairs in the engine room.
There have been numerous sightings over the years of a beautiful lady in white walking down the halls and corridors of the ship. Sometimes she's been spotted in Sir Winston's restaurant. One time, a bartender and several guests saw her dancing around the room.
One afternoon, I was out in the Sir Winston's dining room taking some photos to send to my daughter, and I was the only one out there, and it felt like something touched me on the shoulder. It's a little strange sometimes late at night, though. You think about the different ghosts and spirits.
This is our lobster claw appetizer.
Work of art.
Enjoy your appetizer.
And the sauce is just exquisite.
Wow, this is so complex. The 4 decks below Sir Winston's is the D deck. It is called by the crew the shaft alley or alleyway. This was the heart of the ship, an intricately woven web of twisted steel, of gauges and walkways.
Door 13 down Shaft Alley is without question one of the most haunted spots on the ship, and with good reason.
1966, a young crewman working in Shaft Alley was literally crushed to death by the solid steel, watertight Door 13. And ever since that horrific night, there have been reports of people hearing blood-curdling screams echoing through the bowels of the ship. Screams so anguished, so piercing, that they've been heard as far as 4 decks up in the dining room of Sir Winston's.
There's another ghostly figure that inhabits the Queen Mary. She's been seen and heard over the years by numerous people.
A little girl, and she's always spotted in the first-class swimming pool.
The swimming pool has been closed for years. All the water has been drained and the area is locked tight for safety reasons. Only tours are allowed to pass through.
Well, actually, the first experience that I had with, I guess you could say, ghosts on the Queen Mary was before I even worked here. I had come with my family, I believe it was '93, to visit the ship, and we took a guided tour. And we were down in the first-class swimming pool, which is located on our deck. And as the tour group was leaving, both my mother and myself, we heard the voice of what sounded like a small girl, the one-syllable word, either like hey or play. And then I started working here, and a few months after I had started, I was down in the swimming pool walking through the tour route, as I normally do before my tours, and I heard the same voice saying hey or play. And it was very distinct. It's definitely a little girl, and I thought it was unusual that it was 5 years later and still I heard the same voice down in the pool. And when I know now that there's nobody there.
Who is the mysterious little girl? That's been speculated on for years. There are recorded deaths of children aboard, but still no one is certain whose spirit roams the pool area.
Renowned psychic Peter James did extensive research on the ship, especially in the swimming pool area. This footage that Peter's assistant shot is incredible. Did he really capture the voice of a little girl, a girl named Jackie?
Yes, here, come hold my hand now, Jackie. Let me help you.
Listen again, closely. Is this actually the haunting voice of a long-lost little girl whose spirit is trapped in the echoing hollow of the first-class swimming pool?
Let me help you. Okay, talk to me again.
What I learned about Jackie during my 3-year-plus stay here was that she is lost. I don't believe she's aware of being dead or being on the other side. And this is true of most ghosts.
These are Grandma Yesu place.
Grandma sauce.
It's so airy and light. It's wonderful. It's like a meringue.
Whatever the source of all the paranormal activity may be, we may never know. But the Queen Mary still maintains her place as the most mysterious and luxurious ship afloat. Every night is a celebration, and every dinner is a masterpiece aboard the Queen of the Sea. Anaheim, California is probably best known as the home of Disneyland, whose motto is the happiest place on Earth. Well, Right down the road from the famous theme park is a 4-star restaurant that may well be the home to the happiest ghosts on Earth. It is called simply the White House, and Bruno Serrato has been the owner for almost 20 years. He remembers the very first moment he ever saw this building.
It was like 10 feet outside of the front door, and I stopped for a second, and from the bottom of my feet all the way down to my whole body, I started to feel a strong, powerful feeling. And at the time, I didn't know what it was. And as soon as I walked to the door, and that was before I owned the property, I would open the door and I say, wow, I would love to own this place. But that feeling was so positive, so unbelievable that 6 months later, I heard a phone call, hi, the White House is for sale. I had no money. I didn't have the capability to buy a property like this. Guess what? I was able to do it. Somebody out there who helped me. It's meant to be, and I don't know why, but I had to be here for a reason.
There has been speculation that in many cases, a house or a building chooses a person and invites them in.
The new inhabitant acts as a conductor of sorts, allowing and inviting the spirits to make themselves known.
With a ghost looking over his shoulder, Bruno built the White House into a 4-star culinary spectacular whose homemade lobster ravioli appetizer is famous up and down the coast.
Bruno was extremely curious when he bought the place as to who the ghost might be. In the case of the White House, it was pretty simple.
It was built in 1909, and from 1919 to 1969 was owned by one family, the Truxaws.
The Truxaws, it turned out, were quite well known in Anaheim and the surrounding area. The patriarch was a very well-respected doctor with a reputation for never refusing treatment to anyone and for delivering babies. Lots of babies.
And now I'll show you to the doctor's office, which this is the room. We have over 3,500 babies being delivered in this house. And I don't know if you can see some of the detail, like this doors, original door, and nothing has been changed since 1909.
Fred Ibe is Bruno's brother-in-law. He spent many evenings and late nights at the White House, and he's had many strange and disturbing paranormal encounters.
I hear babies crying. And I said, whoa, what is this? Not one or two, but many babies crying.
The sound of newborn babies is the sound of the life force that permeates this unique home turned 4-star eatery. It seems that the Truxaw family's love for one another has left the presence of good ghosts, specters who simply want to stay in their happy home.
For over 50 years, the White House served as the Truxaw family focal point for parties and gatherings, children playing, festive events, and it still does to this day.
The most pervasive positive vision that haunts the White House today takes the form of a mother and daughter.
I see a little girl, 9-year-old, and a 40-year-old mother.
No one knows their true identity, but no one finds them the least bit disturbing either. Bruno is sure that a little girl is still playing and laughing in the house.
Sometimes I feel like as a young girl running upstairs on the second floor, back and forth. You know, I put the alarm on at night time that nobody can be inside of the property. But I get the feeling there's a ghost of this little child, and I guess it's probably part of the attraction.
The little girl's always bouncing around with, I think, a ball, or she's always running around, skipping around. So that's a picture of happiness.
A lot of times when we are here at the restaurant, we have a customer come in, ask to talk to me, and they tell me, oh, you know what? I used to come to this house because I knew the Truxaw family. I used to play with the children. I used to go up and down the stairs. We used to eat in the dining room here.
Eating now takes place in many of the old rooms in the house. And anyone who eats here leaves happy. Bruno's head chef has made delicious meals for thousands of patrons, including the rich and the famous. Their attention to detail can be seen in this unique dessert tray, a combination of confection that seems to literally float off the plate.
Look at this.
This White House, this unique American haunted restaurant, is like Casper the friendly ghost. And the trick is in her many sumptuous treats. As for Bruno, the man the house chose for its owner, well, he's just happy to be part of its ongoing history.
It's fun to talk to people who used to live here, used to play here. And it's a very interesting, big history of this house. You know, I think I'm the last part of the history of this house. They are the beginning of the history. It's just beautiful, you know.
Next, the rise and fall of St. Louis's early brewmeisters. Did the first makers of American lager beer suffer an unshakable curse? Find out on Haunted Restaurants. St. Louis, Missouri is famous for its towering arch, historic riverfront, and its beer. But long before Anheuser met Busch and Budweiser became the king of beers, Adam Lemp was the king of the St. Louis brewmasters, and his Lemp and Falstaff labels were the brews of choice in America.
In the 1800s, Lemp had amassed a fortune, built a complex brewery and a mansion, and the current owners say it is still haunted by his son and grandsons.
It's now home to a 4-star restaurant with as many as 3 uninvited guests.
There we go. That's the spirits at work here at the Lemp Mansion.
We bought this house in 1975, my mother and father and 9 children, so we've all had a hand in it. The history's been well known about this, the hauntings of this house, from the neighborhood kids and from folklore. The 3 suicides that took place here, and then sightings and different things that occur, then continue the lore.
The Lemp family really managed one of the earliest and largest brewing dynasties in America, and their claim to fame, really, through their patriarch, Adam Lemp, who came over from Germany about 1836, was the fact that they were brewing what we know today as lager beer.
But it was Adam Lemp's only son, William, who ran the family's vast brewing empire and ultimately set in motion the tragic and infamous legend of the 33-room, Victorian-flavored Lemp Mansion.
Lemp purposely built his house and the brewery complex over Native American caves. They were called the Minnehaha Caves.
Lager actually is a German verb for storage or aging, and the process requires a long period of storage while the beer ferments. Ordinarily, that's done in cool climates like the caves that were predominant in St. Louis, which is why the Lemp family located here to do their brewing. William Sr. committed suicide here in the Lemp Mansion in 1904, and that was brought on by depression. He had lost his favorite son, Frederick Lemp, in 1901, and a couple years later, his best friend, Frederick Pabst, passed away. These 2 blows in such a short length of time seemed to lead to just an overwhelming depression that he could not recover from.
Even before William Sr.'s death, there was talk in St. Louis about the mansion being haunted.
Some people even said the house was cursed.
Billy Lemp Jr. and his wife Lillian held lavish parties at the Lemp Mansion.
Lillian Handlin Lemp, she married William Lemp Jr., and she loved this house. And she really was taken with the entertaining and extravagant lifestyles, although she was from a very wealthy family herself.
But the good times were not to last for Lillian and Billy Lemp. In the early 1930s, liquor was outlawed in America when the new prohibition laws were set in place. Billy Lemp saw his empire crumbling beneath him.
The storm clouds of prohibition that were gathering on the horizon for many years finally descended upon brewers like Mr. Lemp. And when he was at the helm of the brewery, it went under, and he never did recover from that shock and the depression that followed. Billy Lemp committed suicide in December of 1922 in his office here in the Lemp Mansion. He was known to say on occasion that if it was good enough for Father, it's good enough for me.
Father and son, who shared the same horrible fate, also shared extremely high standards, as well as a taste for fine food. Current owner and chef Paul Pointer agreed to prepare one of the Lemp's favorite dishes, while we unravel the rest of the mansion's tragic story.
We're actually going to do a signature dish here at the Lemp Mansion. It's called French pepper steak. It's a classic style French pepper steak with butter, cream, and brandy, pounded with fresh cracked pepper.
Among the many tales and stories of the Lemp Mansion and the Lemp family is an intriguing set of circumstances that has been reported by many people. They would look upstairs in the small little attic windows in the servants' quarters and see, peering down at them, a sort of deformed face that everyone called the monkey boy.
There's a possibility that there was a child, illegitimate child, that lived and was kept in the upstairs of the house and was actually locked in the eaves of the house. There's areas up there that are actually walled off and have locking doors on them.
Well, it turns out when I went to the cemetery where the Lemps are buried, I looked in the records and found a small casket way off into the corner, far removed from the rest of the Lemp family, was a small casket that said, "Infant son of William Lemp."
So for now, I'm going to add a little garlic. Again, I like to work it in just a little bit. Just a pinch of salt. I'll also add a little to my gravy. I mentioned the cracked pepper. We'll add a little more as we're cooking. You don't have to be afraid to add too much cracked pepper on this dish. There it gets its name.
2 suicides and a strange apparition in the attic should give any house a haunted reputation. But the Lemp Mansion's not just any house.
As owner and chef, Paul Pointer prepares the specialty of the house. Stay with us as we discover how the ghosts of Lemp Mansion make their presence known on Haunted Restaurants.
We're going to brown this on both sides about 5 minutes. And again, it depends on if you're going to go with rare or well done or wherever you are in between.
2 suicides and a strange apparition in the attic should give any house a haunted reputation. But the Lemp Mansion's not just any house. After William, there was another brother, Charles.
The year was 1949, and Charles was the last of the Lemps to live in the mansion.
Not as much is known about Charles as is known about most of his brothers and other family members, partly by his own choice. He was rather reclusive, he didn't enjoy cameras, and he lived alone in the house, but for 2 servants. There are no photographs of him that I've ever seen that have been reliably depicted as Charles. Charles died, again, like his father and brother before him, he died at his own hand as a result of a gunshot wound to the head.
Okay, we're getting to a point where our skillet's hot enough that we're going to be able to flame the brandy. As you can see, we're browning the meat. We've got our flavor working here. We're going to get a bit of a flame here, so...
After the 3rd suicide in 1949, the mansion was sold, and for the next 30 years, the once grand home was used as a rooming house that slowly deteriorated.
Ghost sightings have occurred in most areas of the Lemp Mansion. Yes, it is a very haunted environment.
Many of the so-called supernatural instances are experienced by restaurant staff because they're here at all hours of the day and night.
We had a gentleman that was doing some restoration on a fresco ceiling in the parlor downstairs, and he actually stopped working on it because he felt the presence of someone in the room so thick and so ominous he couldn't continue.
This dish is very close to being ready. I just need the heavy cream, the whipping cream.
I myself have experienced several things here. I watched a very heavy oak drawer, the center drawer of a large buffet, filled with silverware, closed by itself a few years back. I was walking into the parlor, and my brother working that night glanced over and said, "Hey, Paul, on your way through, close that drawer." And I looked over, saw it open, and as I walked down the long room on my way to close it, I watched the thing close by itself.
Others are experienced by restaurant patrons, partly because now the home has been recently opened as a bed and breakfast. So you may stay here overnight. The adventurous in us may stay here overnight and experience whatever might come your way.
You see that sauce thickening up? Takes on a caramel kind of color because of the pan drippings. And there you are. Classic French pepper steak.
And so our tale of fine food and ghostly spirits in St. Louis is now told. If you ever decide to visit the infamous Lemp Mansion, don't be surprised to find 3 tortured apparitions there on the front steps to greet you. In the 1800s, America was stitched together by the railroads. Any major city, if they wanted to be considered one, boasted a magnificent train station that made people look up and take notice. New York had Grand Central. Chicago had Union Station. So did Los Angeles. And so did Nashville, Tennessee. But times change, and in 1987, after being abandoned and vacant for more than a decade, Nashville's Union Station was rescued, restored, and renovated into a luxury hotel. The station is also home to one of the city's finest restaurants, Arthur's.
Arthur's is a 4-star restaurant. We have won just about every single award there is for restaurants in the United States.
Spanish-born chef Julio Orantes is a true culinary explorer. He's ready to cook just about anything, and he won't be pinned down by a regular menu.
Not having a menu, I can serve different things like ostrich, venison, wild boar. It lets my customers have the opportunity to try all kinds of different things that not many restaurants do around here.
The spirit of adventure and rugged individualism comes naturally around here, especially when you learn of how this remarkable building came into being. It was the vision of one man, Major Eugene Kastner Lewis, that is responsible for Nashville's most impressive edifice. It took 2 years to build, at the cost of $200,000, a tidy sum in the year 1900.
Major Eugene Kastner Lewis all but chiseled the limestone to build Union Station. He oversaw every element of its construction.
He hardly ever left the building, and many people think he's still there 100 years later.
Stay tuned as we take you back to Nashville, to a scary place that serves the finest foods on Haunted Restaurants. At the elegant Union Station Hotel in Nashville, Tennessee, bellman Jimmy Roberts has seen and heard it all.
It was a slow night, and I was standing at the desk, and there was a desk clerk behind there, and a guest came up and said, he was walking down the hall on the 7th floor from his room, and there was someone walking down the hall toward him, and he pointed to my uniform and said, at first I thought it was one of you guys, and he made this gesture of a beard like this. And every time I heard these stories about the sighting on the 7th floor, they always make this gesture of the beard. And he turned around to look again, and there was nothing there, no one there.
Besides the encounters on the 7th floor, there have been numerous other sightings of Major Lewis throughout the building.
He's often seen at his favorite spot, on the railing, peering down from the mezzanine.
It's under the Major's watchful eye that Arthur's has become a world-renowned restaurant known for its varied and exotic dishes, as well as its otherworldly dinner guests.
The chefs at Arthur's have also experienced some unwanted help in the kitchen. Assistance from a ghost they think is named Rudy.
Rudy was the assistant of the person that built the hotel. And his spirit is supposed to be still around here. So that's what everybody says it is.
I have seen little things out the corner of my eye, like 0 dark 30, like 3:30 in the morning, working in the kitchen, think one of my cooks in there, hear something, and you know, I'm the only one there.
Stoves being turned on and turned off without anybody being around. Water being turned on and let it run. Noises.
My stove downstairs, sometimes the flame on it will get turned up on a pot that you have heating real low. You know, I lost a couple of cream sauces like that.
It's a weird feeling. It's like you know there is something out there, and you look for it, and you cannot find it. You're like, what's going on?
There's another apparition or spirit that haunts Union Station, and believe it or not, she's a beautiful woman who's been called the Lady in White.
There are a few stories that speculate as to whom this woman in white may be and why she still lingers at Union Station.
There was a woman who had come to the station to meet her fiancé who was returning from the war. And my sense was that it was World War I, but her fiancé didn't come back alive.
At one time or another, this building has gone through so many things on the past 100 years, such as World War I, World War II, so many happy faces going away and going overseas. Some of these happy faces never did return home as well.
That a woman had committed suicide here or jumped off from a high level in response to learning of her fiancé's death in the war.
The woman in white has made a few startling appearances over the years, and one of them involves a little boy.
An 8-year-old boy was riding the elevator down, and his parents were to meet him in the lobby. And when he got off the elevator, there were his parents, and he turned around, he looked back in the elevator and said to his parents, "Where did she go?" And there's nobody there. And they said, "Well, who?" And there was another employee within earshot and heard the child describe this same figure that had been described by other people in other times of a woman in a long flowing white dress.
Jamie Camara, the proprietor of Arthur's, was seated in the dining room late one night and came almost face to face with a woman in white.
It's just something that I have experienced, something that I have never seen in my life before. And there was a woman which was suspended from the ceiling, which is 22, 24 feet high. And I tried to say something, but this person just vanished into the air return and never come back.
Though it's been documented that most ghost sightings have not posed a physical threat, there can be no dispute that an encounter with the paranormal can be one of the most frightening experiences of someone's life. But under Jamie Camara's command, Arthur's staff embraced the presence of their spirits. In fact, Arthur's special dessert, Bananas Foster and their red-hot orange coffee, Cafe Diablo, are flaming tributes to the ghosts of Union Station. The train stopped running through Union Station nearly 30 years ago, but the station and Arthur's restaurant have a presence all their own. It's played out nightly, as if the building were a stage.
Scared? Perhaps I was, and I won't admit it.
We are an old restaurant. We have an old tradition. And people expect old restaurants with old traditions to have their friendly ghost somewhere. It's a lot better to have a ghost than a skeleton in the closet.